Okay, will of the people good, dreams good. We've got problems, the world's got problems. What do you stand for? You claim to be an anarchist, a communist. You sound like a right-winger when espousing leftist ethics and like a leftist when espousing right-wingers ethics. COVID mandates, vaccine mandates, Russia, Ukraine. Fuck. Your views on prostitution, drugs, abortion, your feelings of gay or transsexuals, any minority rights issues. What are you for? What are you against? What are you against but will support? Is there nothing so disgusting to you that you'd fight it, regardless of the majority being for it? Hmm. I guess that can only be found out through self-discovery. But as it stands now, I can't think of a damn thing. And most of the things just mentioned, they don't sound like left or right-wing concerns. If someone actually has concerns about these things, then their problem isn't with leftism or rightism, but with assholism. The exceptions being the COVID situation and the Ukrainian-Russian war, which I'll cover a bit later since it'll require more explanation, because it's not a Ukrainian-Russian war, but instead it's a Ukrainian-Russian versus USA-NATO war, of which I'm quite concerned with NATO's and specifically Greece's actions in this affair. Most of the things just mentioned, I don't carry a for or against feeling, but I do have various personal feelings, and I'd rarely legislate because of my feeling. But it is true that I can espouse ethics from the supposedly opposite position. When it comes to a philosophy, especially a political one, that's the way I measure its worth. And that's especially true when being critical. I'm generally harsher in judgment when measuring my anarchist communist ethics than I am with a right-winger and theirs. I do so because I hold myself to the highest standard. They must find their own paths. Moreover, that's how I was able to discover all the right-wingers in leftist clothing, those who've infiltrated our ranks to weaken us from the inside. And another reason is so I could reach out to those with opposite feelings. It follows my logic of that someone can only make peace with their enemies. And in doing, I found that under the right conditions, there isn't any difference between a left or a right winger. When times of need arise, we all behave the same. There are no philosophies in times of need. There are no left or right wingers. There are no communists or monarchists, feudalists, fascists, militarists. There are only people doing the best we can. Hence my anarchist philosophy. I can curse and condemn the actions of Joseph Stalin with the most ardent anti-communist, and sing the praises of the College of Colonels. But because I'm a political creature, because I'm in revolt, I just can't allow myself to do so blindly. For my fellow communists, if you can't criticize Joseph Stalin as an asshole for doing assholish things, then you've automatically degraded your intellect. And others, who are already against our philosophy, will find no value in your arguments. Was Stalin an asshole? Of course he was. That's not under question. He had people killed just for disagreeing with him. But inasmuch as he was an asshole, he also did great things. However, you can't communicate, come to an understanding with someone opposite of you until you acknowledge the reasons why they are opposite of you. Now from here on, I'll be putting out my thoughts with a mainly American perspective. The reasons for this are many. However, the main reason is behind the title of this, hate speech, and also what I said before in the first part regarding the simpleton mindset. The largest, petty bourgeoisie enemy that I face on the philosophical level is the mainstream media, MSM, and more than any other, the American MSM. Most other MSM outlets within the American, NATO, and Five Eyes sphere of influence are simply branches of the American British MSM, and the simpleton mindset is the base operating mindset for the MSM, and it's presented in mealy-mouthed paraplenicos fashion with movable goalposts of ethical standards. Also, no MSM outlet has conducted anti-communist propaganda quite like the American. In times of need, we all behave the same. I can curse communists and sing the praises of dictators, I can espouse left and right-wingers' ethics from their antithetical sides. Governments under control of a supposedly communist party can be repressive, and military dictatorships can be liberating. Here in Greece, we've had several dictatorships, the last one being a military junta called the College of Colonels. They, like Joseph Stalin, did great things. Leftist, communist things. Public works projects and farming subsidizations being the most famous. I cannot undo decades of anti-communist propaganda, nor do I want to. In this era of mass communication and liberty of philosophical thought, if someone can't be bothered, at least, to pick up and read the Communist Manifesto to find out for themselves the fucking basics of communist thought, then I don't know how to help the fuckers. I really don't. As I said in part 1, they want to be led by the nose to tidbit of information from tidbit of information, and then have someone do the work of transmuting the information into wisdom for them. I have no desire to prop up another's laziness. However, I don't believe it to be necessary anyway. As I stated, I don't have a problem with left-wingers versus right-wingers. I have a problem with assholes, in that everyone is so far up into everyone else's asses that we can't see past the shit. Every grievance, every slight or insult magnified beyond truth, and all because of someone being the other, as well as the way we communicate. As the German lyrical, musical, philosophical team Rammstein once said, we all live in America. And with that, the lingua franca is American. However, it's not that we communicate in languages not our own that's a problem, but it's that we communicate with limited contextual text within the confines of social media outlets, and usually further confined in predetermined parameters of others' ideas of reality. Now, to highlight this, I'm a cinephile. I enjoy channels that talk about and analyze cinema, theater. Especially when it comes to American cinema, I'm starting to enjoy more the critique channels over most of what the Hollywood produces. I like these channels a lot for what they are, for what they do within their area of subject matter expertise. However, where political thought gets intermingled, things get derailed. Derailed because of differing ideas of reality, as well as the simpleton mindset. Now, since I said that I'll go into detail about the Ukrainian-Russian versus USA-NATO war, I'll hit that now. And I'll use a post I made on a critique channel that was condemning the controversy at the Academy Awards this year. Now, I don't remember how he said things or how things led up to what he said, but as he laid out his condemnation, he threw out some flippant line condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine. What follows is my response. Jesus, dude, what the fuck is up with this weird hard-on you have against Putin? Why is it that Ukraine is some kind of a victim for you? Do you have any idea what's going on over here? Why is it that you can question everything from the MSM, the mainstream media, or access media as you like to call it, in regards to entertainment news, but when it comes to serious things, things that carry with them multi-billion-dollar investments, like political news, war news, you swallow it all unquestioningly. The U.S. has for years funneled weapons and funds into Ukraine, of which the majority went directly into uber-nationalist hands like C-14 and the Azov Battalion. For around 8 years, ever since the coup d'etat led by C-14, sponsored by the US and NATO, these uber-nationalist groups have been killing anyone with a Russian name. Some, who even protested their actions, were burned alive in execution ceremonies. With this, uber-nationalists being funded by the US and NATO, and ethnic Russians being killed as the most egregious affronts, let alone Ukraine siphoning Russian fuel exports to the European Union for decades. You can't think that Russia, Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Putin might just be a bit justified in their actions, especially since Russia has tried everything else short of war. Russians and Ukrainians generally love each other. They see themselves as extended family. Out of the old Soviet Union, there were more Ukrainian-Russian mixed marriages than between any other nationalities. The United States only sees this as a power play, a play to grow influence and to sell more fuel to the European Union. This war is breaking Russian and Ukrainian hearts. There are no Russian or Ukrainian bad guys here. There are American bad guys fueling Ukrainian psychopaths. Now, I heard you say many times that you don't like whataboutisms. I don't know why. I see it as just pointing to examples. But how would you think that the U.S. would respond if a foreign hostile power started funding mulatto, mestizo, or cholo extremist groups in Mexico? What if those groups started killing traditionally American populations like the Mormon settlements or the Irish? Don't you think that at least the U.S. would say, hey, stop that? You can also look to historical precedents if you want. The U.S. really didn't take too kindly to the United Kingdom supporting the Confederate States. Dude, long-time fan here. If you read this and wonder how I can go off like this based on one flippant line that you threw out, it's because it was flippant. This shit's serious over here where I live, and I gotta fight my own government who follows everything American unquestionably. Yeah, that's the end of my response. But I can't understand why it takes on an anti-Russian point of view. I mean, with all the bullshit being shellacked over the minds of the populace by the American, NATO, Five Eyes, MSMs, it's easy to see why some would come out and say, like, Russia invaded Russia bad. I can even understand forgetting the prior 8 years. 8 years of MSM news reports, no less, filled with stories of corruption, U.S. Ukrainian government and business connections, bougie shit. Yeah, so I can understand that. If you're not into politics in the first place and all you hear about is war, then I'm quite sure that's easy to forget about the details. However, what is harder for me to accept is going out of the way to put out anti-Russian propaganda or to prop up an anti-Russian mindset based on personal ignorance. And this highlights my point of our problem being with assholism. We don't need to be for or against every fucking thing. We don't even have to have opinions on every fucking thing. If you don't know about something as heinous as war, how two sides can come to a place that the only fucking way to settle things is by killing them, then please, shut the fuck up. Hey, why do you care about entertainment news presenters? I generally don't. However, this part is following what I said just a bit ago, that I'll be putting things out with a mostly American perspective. And when it comes to the American mindset, it's described theatrically. The American economy is a death economy. If it being with the war industry and weapons, the prison industrial system and the judicial branch, or the medical insurance industry and pharmaceuticals, the U.S. will turn your pain, suffering, and death into energy to fuel itself. Now, outside of those three, the entertainment industry is the next largest element of the American economy. And even before the founding of Silicon Valley, California still had a GDP greater than most nations, and due to the entertainment media industry. In this, the U.S., because of this situation, everything is extreme and bipolar. It's simple childishness. There are no sides that simply disagree, as well as there being no more than two sides. It's bipolar, holy versus evil. In childish theatrics, it's He-Man versus Skeletor, Lion-O versus Moomra. There is nothing beyond left versus right, good versus bad. If you're an anarchist, then everyone else are fascist. If you're a conservative, then everyone else are libtards. And if you're a capitalist, then everyone else are damn dirty collectivist commies. Democrat versus Republican, Pepsi versus Coke, McDonald's versus Burger King. If you're with one, everyone else are bad. And the Green Party, Royal Cola and Hardee's, Carl's Jr., well, hell, they're just plain anarchist assholes trying to muddy the waters. The simpleton mindset. The mindset that doesn't allow for nuance. The examination of complexity. And it certainly doesn't allow for self-reflective questioning. For my own simpleton mindset, I'll be sticking with the critique channels that I like so much. The reason why will be made apparent by the end. Firstly, I think that it's funny to note that all, and without exception, states that they don't want to talk about politics, that all they want to do is talk about pop culture. And that's where I chime in. Because if you talk about culture, either it being popular or non-popular culture, you're talking about culture, a political thing. And with that, they all end up talking more about politics than critiquing cinema. And sadly, without proper understanding of the definitions of political terms. Fuck. Even those dweebs in the US have a libertarian party that's a right-wing free market party. Whereas, my dear Americans, libertarian is a left-wing term invented by anarchists to label an aspect of anarchy. You Americans are just fucking goofy. Now, for those discussing the entertainment industry, you have a few distinct categories. Review channels are by far the most even-keeled. Usually the people who run these channels have worked in the industry and they don't go overboard with praise or condemnation, and they certainly don't talk about political things. They focus on the art of cinema. Promotion channels are next. Now these channels don't criticize at all. These channels don't go out of the way to find news or any kind of information. What they do is they take what the promotion departments of the studios put out, add their own special flavor, and then present it to us in a more theatrical manner. And critique channels are the final group. They're the polar opposite of the promotion channels. All they do is find news, and if they speak on anything that the promotion departments put out, it's only to criticize it. If critique channels say anything good, it's only to highlight and compare it to the thing that they're criticizing at the moment. I like all these channels for what they are. The review channels I like because they're like taking a lecture. I learn a lot. Promotion channels I like for the fun-loving energy. And I like them for the same and opposite reasons of the critique channels, for the fun-loving energy. However, the problem with the promotion and critique channels are the same as well. A total lack of objective honesty. And that hits hard when getting into other topics. Politics. Now, when you're a critique channel, you're critical. You spend your time looking for the bad. Even if there isn't anything bad but just mediocre, you'll make it bad so that you'll have something to comment on, with a higher degree of dramatic flair. Then after some time, it'll just start to become second nature. You'll see the bad even in the good. It's called becoming jaded. When it comes to the bougie institution of Hollywood, the highest degree of promotion is woke. For by its nature, it gets the highest degree of naturally energetic perpetual promotion. It's the highest height of virtuous holiness to the promotion channels, as it is evil to the critique channels. Although in reality, it's the highest height of assholishness, for it turns all sides into assholes. Woke only serves in creating sides, in serving the lunatic fringe. We don't need to take sides on everything, nor do we have to have opinions on everything. In this realm of media, all sides are so far up the other's asses that we can't see past the shit. It's all He-Man versus Skeletor, all Lion-O versus Mumm-Ra. Everyone who isn't you are enemies to your virtue. And this hits at the the general area, the superficial layers of my political nature, into everything that I've written thus far. Woke is too cheap, too derogatory. It excites nothing in me. The only reason why it concerns me is because media and entertainment brandishes it as normality for their own purposes. So, the majority of the critique channels denounces it, and along with it, the communist philosophy. Or, I should say, their ideas of what communism, of what Marxism is, because for some reason, wokeism decided to call itself a leftist philosophy. It is not. I'm a communist. I'm a Star Trek fan. Now, if you've seen any promotional material coming from Star Trek, Paramount Studios, CBS, what have you, you probably think that I was even more fond of Star Trek now because of their public endorsement and funding of Black Lives Matter, an organization that claims to be Marxist. You would be wrong. In fact, Star Trek's endorsement and funding of Black Lives Matter only lowers them in my view, because Black Lives Matter isn't Marxist, communist, leftist by any means of the word. Black Lives Matter is a fucking right-wing and leftist clothing shit show that uses leftist rhetoric to bring in massive amounts of money for the higher-ups in the organization to be able to buy multi-million-dollar houses. All this does is degrade the institution of Star Trek for me and the communist ethic in the eyes of the naive. Woke is a marketing term to antagonize and signal virtue at the simpleton level. It addresses the lunatic fringe. It antagonizes the host and owners of the critique channels. That's the reason why I focused on them. They touch on our simpleton mindsets. Things are complex, and at times we want the simple. We want the holy versus evil, the Lino versus Mumra. But that's not good. It's not healthy. Not when you're an adult. There's so much variety in humanity that to simplify things like that, I'd call sinful. And I hope that someone would be able to see that in these first few videos that I put out. For example, when I was talking about respecting our ancestors, and how a traditionalist and a Rhesus Postes can do so but differently. I'm hoping that some traditionalists would say to themselves, hey, I see their accomplishments as a burden to strive beyond too. With complexity of thought, we'll see more similarities in others that we've traditionally called our enemies. And hopefully we'll see things in others that we don't like about ourselves. That way we can finally crawl out of each other's asses and allow others to grow and develop the way that they see fit. However, sadly, we're not there yet. And with that, I'm filled with anger. And I express myself in what is usually called hate speech. I must denounce hate speech, and not the fact that when someone is angry, they express themselves in a manner called hate speech. No. I must denounce hate speech as hate speech. I denounce all laws confining the free expression of the feelings of man. I denounce hate speech. Confining how man expresses ourselves is tyrannical. Fuck that shit. Making verbal expression of anger impossible will make physical expression of anger inevitable, and because it is tyrannical, it's the tool of the bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie to control the narrative. Fuck that shit. And I'll finish up now with this American perspective. It gives me a goddamn headache. Everything is so convoluted and wrapped up onto and into itself it becomes farcical. Ask an American their feelings about climate change and you'll hear back something like water is wet, and then they'll fucking sit there staring at you acting as though they answered your question. But I had to, though, because American culture has made inroads to Greece. Now, not to the extent as like in Germany or the United Kingdom, where they're not even real nations anymore. They're simply American states in Europe, But because the US is here and uses Greece for their purposes, I had to go into the American perspective, or the promoted American NATO Five Eyes perspective, because of woke. While woke is on the superficial layer, because it's the promoted virtue, it's strong and it's thick. You can't have real conversations of real issues because once you've talked to someone, once you talk through all the bullshit of fucking woke to get to the matters of consequences, you're fucking exhausted. As this, what I'm doing here, is the perfect example. Hell, and I haven't even started to talk about the things that I wanted to, and I'm getting tired now. And all I really did is describe just the sandbox of bullshit that we play in. I hope at least I made it entertaining for you. Honestly, I wish that when asked about like the Ukrainian-Russian versus USA-NATO war, I could just say how I feel about it and state my solutions for it. But since I start off by fighting the official narrative by not even recognizing it as an unprovoked invasion by Russia, I had to go through all this, well, fucking bullshit. And this is where woke, minority rights, and hate speech collide. This is where the bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie manipulates the proletariat at the intellectual level by manipulating the narrative. There is no such fucking thing as hate speech. There's just speech, and of course, speech can be used when someone is filled with hate. Everything, up till now, I would classify as hate speech simply because I'm filled with hate. It's funny to think, though, that no one else would classify what I said as hate speech simply because it hasn't gone against the protected groups. Till now. Hate speech, along with its practical equivalent hate crimes, has one of its bases and one of the most faultiest of premises, that the minority, the underdog, is somehow always right. That they can do no wrong nor think no wrong. Just as there is no such thing as hate speech, there is no such thing as hate crimes. There is just crime. The terms hate speech and crime must be stricken. To have these terms, to have these laws, is sinful. The existence of these laws promotes the idea of the other, that we are not all equal under the law. The idea that in Germany, some can have a banner with a swastika on it, while others cannot, based on their race or religion, is a law based in bigotry. The idea that in the U.S., some can say the word nigger, while others cannot, based on their race, is bigotry. And this is the woke. This is the thing that must be stricken. It is a horrid situation that we now have black people. We now have gay people, trans people, that we now have women. Once we get rid of all the blacks, the gays, the trans, the women, the happier and more pleasant the world will be. And if you feel left out of this grouping here, feel free to inject the identity that you subscribe to differentiate yourself from me. Now, I said in my third work, Who Wants Freedom? Many don't want freedom. For most, freedom is an easy thing to have if they simply take it. But most don't want freedom. For if they were free, they'd have no one to blame for their shortcomings or failures. For many, being subjugated is comforting, because when you're subjugated, no failure is your own, and that's comforting to many. Comfort in the knowledge that they could never fail because they had no power to succeed in the first place. Personally, I find such people to be about as worthless as the phobic phobes. And that is what you have with the blacks, the trans, the fucking whatevers. You have professional blacks, professional women, professional whatevers. People whose greatest value, worth, greatest contribution to the advancement of humanity is based in their utmost superficial accidents of birth. Take a black person's blackness away from them, and their worth is eliminated. Professional women cry like children about what they feel is an injustice of unequal pay, and that they want or even deserve equal pay. Equality is the last thing a professional woman wants. Equality is what women have. Professional women can't hold a candle to a woman, and they know it. That is why they must promote, through woke, imaginary slights. Most don't want freedom. Most have no pride or dignity. Most are too afraid to be embarrassed. Your fear of shame is stagnating your development. So, that's who I am, and this is what I stand for. I am the utmost extreme populist. While yes, I am a leftist, a communist working for anarchy, a soon-to-be anarchist, that's why I'm a populist. Here in recent history, the will of the people has been ignored. Governance has been conducted only by consent of the people. Now, many are probably asking now, what's the difference between consent and will of the people? And consent and will of the people all comes down to how people use democracy. A few years ago, someone asked me if I thought that if we had democracy in Greece. He was shocked to hear me say yes. He expanded on his question by asking me why, if I thought that we had democracy simply because we could vote. I told him no, but that wasn't the point of his questioning, and I knew it. There's an idea in modern culture that goes that we don't have democracy because who we're allowed to vote for have already been pre-selected by the true governors. I understood it. I mean, hell, it was something that I used to believe before I transmuted information into wisdom. But true, that when we vote, all of those that in the final rankings for our votes are pre-selected. But that isn't what makes a democracy. What makes a democracy is that if you feel all of those who are putting themselves up before public scrutiny to hold power are lacking, well then you have the power to run for office yourselves. Even now under custody of the European Union, we still have democracy. The thing is that we can't express it with votes. We must engage in a more radical form of democratic expression if we want the will of the people to be adhered to. If you don't use democracy, your will never be upheld because you surrendered your democratic obligation to others. You gave your consent for others to brutalize you. Now, I got so much more to say, so many more thoughts. But as I said many times, the time for words is done. They've all been said. We all know that things are fucked. And they're not fucked because of fascists or communists. They're fucked because good people got lazy and surrendered rule to the corrupt. Hey, for someone that says that the time for words is done, you sure use a lot of them. The simpleton again. I use words because I don't want to revolt. Just because I said that upcoming deed is being forced upon me more forcibly as time goes by, that doesn't mean that I'm not hoping for salvation. I just don't see it coming. But I do want someone in leadership to show that they're worthy of that position and to fight for the will of the people. I must believe that there is some good in the worst of us. Because if I don't believe that, then what the fuck would be the point of revolting? If I actually believed that there was nothing left of goodness, I wouldn't waste my time and possibly risk my life. Develop pride in yourselves and your loved ones. Stop allowing yourselves to be fucking kicked. And more importantly, Revolt for what you know is right. Comrades, viva